The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles holds a place in many of our hearts, spanning multiple generations in the comics, cartoons and movies. In 2022 there's multiple reboots in the works, including a new animated movie with Seth Rogen and a possible fourth sequel to the original live-action movie. The Lost Ronin comics came out recently and attracted a lot of interest, and the Shredder's Revenge game was a brilliant update to an old format. So, that got me thinking. I love the Turtles for many reasons, but one of them has to be the villains. So it got me thinking, what villains do we want to see in these projects? Here's a list of the TMNT villains I would most like to see in these projects. Number 1, the Shredder. Probably the most memorable villain of the whole franchise, and that's for a very good reason. Oroku Saki has been the primary antagonist throughout most incarnations. In the comics, he got killed off in the very first appearance, although he did return lots of times in later runs. All the movie versions were either slightly or completely off to me, with the original weird glittery costume being best, and the hulking transformer Michael Bay abomination coming in last. Shredder's got a rich history and they can choose to adapt many different story threads. I personally think they should just stick to a ninja-based story and focus on the feud between Splinter and maybe another rival clan, such as the Purple Dragons. Just please don't make him an Ultron like they did in 2003 cartoon. I like my Shredder to be human. And that segues beautifully into number 2, probably the most unique villain of the franchise, Krang. Unfortunately, we've only seen Krang once in live action, and well, Michael Bay. He looked pretty good, he did, but we didn't see enough of him or anything to do with Dimension X or anything that actually makes Krang interesting. Like, come on, he's a talking, highly intelligent brain monster walking around in a robot body, trapped in a dimension, trying to invade ours, trying to take over the world. It just opens up the story potentials massively for space travel, intergalactic characters, and even all that weird time travel stuff they love to do. I want to see a scary version of the Technodrome. I want to see Krang create multiple android suits, have them destroyed and create more. I want to get into all of that lovely B-movie stuff. And speaking of B-movie, let's talk about number 3. Another fan favorite everyone seems to love, Baxter Stockman. Little old Baxter always intrigues me, and I was never a fan of the Mousers as the design just looks kinda goofy to me. But I do think it's integral to his story and should definitely be introduced. A scientist has developed robots to deal with the city's growing rat problem and is praised, then is shafted, forced into a life of crime, and eventually loses his humanity to his own technology, hopefully becoming a giant fly. And keeping with that theme, let's talk about Bebop and Rocksteady. Now, who doesn't love these two? They look pretty good in the last film, but were just comic relief, much like the original cartoon. In the 2012 version, they look so weird, I just couldn't get into them. But they did at least give them a lot more character, making them more than just one-dimensional henchmen. I believe one of them was an arms dealer, and the other one was a professional thief? Cat burglar or something? I didn't really see it, so I couldn't really say. What I do know is they were far more intelligent than I've ever seen them portrayed anyway, so it seemed cool. In the comics, they've had a lot more darker moments. Once they almost killed Donatello, beating him to an inch of his life. I think the designs are perfect and should remain the same, but the characters themselves just need a bit more depth and motivation. Make them extremely violent and scary. They just need to be formidable and not class clowns. And with that being said, let's go to one of the more serious organizations. Everyone's favorite group of ninjas, the Foot and Tatsu. Now, obviously, if you have the Shredder, you gotta have the Foot. But Tatsu, he made his debut in the first live-action Turtles film as Shredder's right-hand man, and then wasn't seen for years. I recently found out he did actually return for the 2013 cartoon, and well, he was amazing. He wipes the floor with a number of the heroes, showing superior martial arts, and it was pretty impressive. If they just add a little bit more depth and mystery and history, they got a winner. I couldn't find much information online about the character himself, but I think they could fill it out. It'd be a great addition if they delved more into the street level ninja wars that have been going on. Now this one's admittedly a little bit strange, but it could work. Rat King. He's never made an appearance in live action and has had a few different versions of him over the years. We have the OG hobo Rat King that looks like the one from the comics, but unfortunately he doesn't have much in regards to character development. He's killed off and returns a ghost, and that's about it. In the OG cartoons, he's sometimes seen as an anti-hero helping the turtles, but in the newer comics, he's more of an ancient vampire-like being that can hypnotize people and do a bunch of other weird stuff. I kinda like that version. It works, but they should definitely stick with a more creepy vibe. I absolutely despise rats and think that a man that could control a horde of rats to eat somebody is absolutely petrifying. I think that the 2012 version is the worst design. He just looks like he's a corpse to me. In this version, he's a scientist that turns his lab partner into a chimp. He's later blown up in a lab explosion, blinding him, and then somehow he develops the ability to see through the rat's eyes. Pretty creepy. So, let's go back a different way and talk about Karai, Shredder's daughter, or is it Splinter's? Depends on the continuity, I guess. I personally never was a huge fan of the character, but the story around her is great. Stolen at birth and raised by the Shredder after he struck down her mother in a confrontation with Yoshi, Splinter's master, or Splinter himself. She walks a thin line of being under the rule of her father and the Foot, and being close with the turtles, notably Leo. I always thought it was a bit weird them kissing. It kind of reminded me of some dodgy vids my mate showed me in the early days of the internet. But look, we're getting off track. She could work. Anyway, let's move on to the next lot, and this is the Punk Frogs. Only joking. They were terrible. Let's go with Leatherhead. Aside from the great design in pretty much every iteration, Leatherhead has had a menacing presence that I feel could work great if done right in live action. I really liked the original as a kid, but that admittedly was because of Crocodile Dundee clone. It's pretty silly. In other versions, he's been a human that was transformed into an alligator, working with Shredder and becoming a wrestler of all things. In the IDW comics, he was imprisoned by Kang for centuries. And at one point, Krang made Leatherhead his new host, using his body as his body. Leatherhead did later get revenge though, eating Krang. In the 2012 version, he was flushed down the toilet, then found by Utrons who experimented on him, and he was saved by the Turtles in the 2003 version. They could pretty much take elements of all of these, mix them up a little bit, and it would work. Alright, let's go to number 9, the Triceratons. These intergalactic soldiers usually are depicted as living on the asteroid ships after their home planet was destroyed, forming a militaristic empire in space. In other versions, they had feuds with Krang. As you guessed it, Krang managed to get his hands on some Triceratops centuries ago whilst on Earth and experimented on them, mutating them. With an army in space, we've obviously seen him invade Earth and sometimes take the turtles off worlds and force them to fight for their life in a combat tournament, like Bloodsport or something. Cool, I loved it. Again, I picked these guys mainly because of their design, menacing appearance, but let's not forget they're extremely formidable and powerful opponents. Just beating one of these guys would give the turtles a hard time. I just think that anything in space travel should probably wait until the second or third film. Before we get into the last one, let's name a few honorable mentions. Number 1, Lord Drake. By the time he made an appearance, I'd grown out of it and moved on to anime or something. But from what little I know, he's from Dimension X and is a warlord much like Krang. Perhaps he'd be good in Dimension X fight scene, or I don't know, something with Krang, set up for later films, intergalactic travel, that sort of thing. Number 2, Toko Razor, figures Razor. The pathetic replacement for Bebop and Rocksteady in the second live-action film. These two were brainless cannon fodder, but I think with a cooler design, a bit more depth, as I keep saying, they could be cool. Maybe link them with the Purple Dragons, who are rivals to the Foot. That could work, right? I would love to see them fight Bebop and Rocksteady to the death, with the latter dying. Somebody being impaled, charging into a rhino, slammed across the room or something. Number 3, Old Hob. This guy's only appeared in the comics and was tagged onto the original origin story. He was there when the turtles were exposed to the mutagen and tries to eat one of the turtles. He's exposed, blinded by Splinter, who claws out his eye. Maybe it's just me because I love Thundercats, but I think it could be really good. And lastly, let's go with Slash. He's normally a lot bigger and animalistic in his depictions. I don't know much about him, so please let me know. And lastly, number 10, Hun and the Purple Dragons. Now, the Purple Dragons seem to be an offshoot of the Foot, but more of a street level. I was first introduced to Han in the cartoon. Bit weird he was a massive white guy being a ninja, but the massive size and again, intimidating presence always interested me. Personally, he was responsible for the creation of the vigilante Casey Jones by burning down his dad's business in an extortion row. In the Mirage comics, after this happened, Han almost beats Casey Jones to death, but is stabbed in the neck, causing him to go blind in one eye. He then lifted Casey Jones and smashed him into the floor head first, putting him into a coma. In the 2003 version, one of the first sent to kill Yoshi, but was stopped and scarred by Splinter, who was just a rat at this point. He also had a hatred for Karai, wanting to see her disgraced or dead. He makes an attempt on her life with the aid of Baxter. He would later go against the Shredder when he finds out he's an Ultron. In the 2012 cartoon, he's more of a Bruce Lee clone. It's supposed it makes sense, he's Chinese and that, but I'd honestly prefer the other version. And that other version did appear in the Turtles Forever cartoon where he came into contact with Mutagen, but it was weird. But anyway, that is the list. Please let me know what you think below. What would you like to see? Who would you like to see? Let me know. Drop a subscribe, drop a like, and much love, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Peter Pazuzu out.